What if you could see without your eyes? Not with lenses, or corneas, or retinas, but with something deeper, something ancient, something eternal. They call it the third eye, symbol of intuition, a window to the soul, the seat of consciousness. But science calls it something else, a pineal gland, a tiny organ nestled in the center of the brain, just the size of a grain of rice. It regulates your sleep, it responds to light, and perhaps it holds the key to dimensions unseen. For centuries, mystics, yogis, and sages have spoken of an eye that sees beyond the veil. They weren't speaking of biology, they were pointing to a gateway, a bridge between body and spirit. But could these two things be one and the same? Could this mystical third eye and this biological pineal gland be two sides of the same hidden coin? Or are they simply metaphors mistaken for matter? This is more than a question of science or spirituality. It's a question of perception itself, of what we choose to see and what we are ready to awaken within. Join us as we travel through ancient temples and modern labs, through skull and soul, through symbol and cell, to uncover the truth behind the eye that sees within. This is the mystery of inner sight, the third eye in ancient teachings. Long before the microscope, before brain scans and scientific journals, there were visions. Visions of energy, of light, of consciousness expanding like a lotus flower in bloom. Mine. Never. In Hinduism, the third eye is known as the Ajna chakra. It sits in the center of the forehead, between the brows, a vortex indigo energy, said to govern intuition, perception, and the ability to see beyond illusion. Ajna means command or perceive. Ajna means command or perceive. It is the command center of inner knowing. When this chakra is open, it's believed we gain access to higher wisdom, clairvoyance, telepathy, and the kind of insight that doesn't come from books but from beyond. In yoga and meditation practices, the Ajna chakra is visualized as a two-petaled lotus, each petal representing duality, masculine and feminine, logic and intuition, sun and moon. When balanced, it aligns us with truth. But India was not alone in honoring this mystical eye. Mintir. In ancient Egypt, the symbol of the Eye of Horus emerges from stone and papyrus, a stylized eye with distinct curves and markings. More than a symbol of protection, more than art. Some believe it's a symbolic blueprint of the human brain. When overlaid on a sagittal section of the brain, the Eye of Horus astonishingly mirrors the location and structure of the pineal gland and surrounding anatomy. The thalamus, the corpus callosum, the pineal gland in the center. Coincidence, or ancient anatomical knowledge encoded in myth? The Eye of Horus also represents restoration, a story of being broken and made whole again. Perhaps a metaphor for the human journey, to awaken the inner sight that has long been asleep. In Buddhism, this inner eye is called the Eye of Wisdom. The Buddha is often depicted with a dot between the eyebrows, symbolizing the awakened mind, the eye that sees truth, not the truth of appearances but the truth of reality itself. To see with the Eye of Wisdom is to see without judgment, without ego, to perceive the impermanence of all things, and to rest in awareness that transcends thought. Even in esoteric Western traditions, like Theosophy and Hermeticism, the third eye appears again, called the Eye of the Spirit, or the Eye of Revelation. The ancient Hermeticists believed that to awaken the third eye was to open the gateway between the worlds, to touch the divine, but to remember what we once knew but forgot. The third eye is never described as just a concept. It's experienced in deep meditation, in moments of altered consciousness, that reveals symbols, visions, knowing that comes not from thought but from direct insight. To the ancients, this wasn't supernatural. It is natural. That this wasn't supernatural, a sense like any other, one that had simply atrophied from disuse. And yet, could it be that this sense had a physical seat in the body? Something real, but this waiting to be rediscovered. And so we arrive at the edge, where myth meets matter, where spirit touches science, where the third eye may find its mirror in biology. The pineal gland, a tiny structure tucked deep within the geometric center of the brain, shaped like a pine cone, hence its name, and revered by ancient cultures who seem to know far more than they should have. In Hindu and Buddhist art, pine cone patterns appear in sacred headdresses. In ancient Assyrian carvings, divine beings hold pine cone-like objects to their foreheads. And in Vatican City, a massive bronze pine cone sculpture sits in the court of the pine cone. A relic of mystery, sitting in plain sight. But what is this gland truly? In purely scientific terms, the pineal gland is part of the epithalamus, nestled between the two hemispheres of the brain. It is roughly 5 to 8 millimeters in length, about the size of a grain of rice. And yet this grain may hold galaxies within. Its primary function, according to modern science, is the regulation of melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone responsible for managing our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycles, the inner clock that tells us when to rise and when to rest. The pineal gland is light sensitive, not directly but through its connection to the retina. Light enters the eyes. Signals travel to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. From there, the pineal gland is told whether it's day or night, and in response, it secretes melatonin. Melatonin levels rise in the evening, fall in the morning. This rhythm governs everything from mood to immune function to hormonal balance. But the mystery does not end with melatonin, because nestled within this gland is another possibility. A chemical called DMT, dimethyltryptamine. DMT is a powerful psychedelic compound. It induces vivid, otherworldly visions, experiences of ego dissolution, timelessness, unity, and contact with something beyond. Some researchers and mystics have speculated that the pineal gland may produce DMT, not constantly, but in moments of intense transformation, near-death experiences, or during states of deep meditation. Dr. Rick Strassman, a pioneering DMT researcher, proposed the idea in the 1990s. In his book DMT, The Spirit Molecule, he suggested the pineal gland as the likely source. Though conclusive scientific proof remains elusive, the idea has captivated minds across discipline. The pineal gland is also the only part of the brain that is not bilaterally paired. There is only one, or a singular point of stillness in the center of thought. It is enclosed in a mysterious cavity filled with cerebrospinal fluid, floating in its own sacred space. Is untouched, is unpaired, is unpaired, is unpaired, is unpaired, is almost soft, and for reasons still unclear it becomes calcified over time. Exposed to fluoride, toxins and aging, it begins to harden. It begins to harden, lose its sensitivity, its power. Many spiritual seekers interpret this as symbolic, a physical metaphor for spiritual blindness, a culture disconnected from its own inner wisdom. But here is the real question. Is the pineal gland just a light-sensitive biological clock? Or is it the hardware for a deeper kind of perception? A built-in gateway to inner realms? Even the philosopher René Descartes referred to it as the seat of the soul. Its soul. He believed the pineal gland was the place where the mind interacted with the body, the interface between thought and matter, between form and formlessness. And so we find ourselves again at the edge, between two paradigms. The one says the pineal gland is simply a biological timer. The other says it's a cosmic antenna, a bridge to higher states of consciousness. Could it be both? In the next part we explore this very overlap, where symbol and structure dance in uncanny harmony, where the third eye and the pineal gland begin to look indistinguishable, perhaps because they always were. So let us look closer, closer at the symbol, closer at the structure, and ask, where do they begin to merge? The Eye of Horus, one of the most iconic emblems of ancient Egypt, seen in stone carvings, sarcophagi, and sacred temples. It was said to offer protection, wisdom, and power. Here's where the mystery deepens. When overlaid with a cross-section of the human brain, the Eye of Horus aligns almost perfectly with the anatomy surrounding the pineal gland. The Eye of Horus aligns almost perfectly with the anatomy surrounding the pineal gland. The eye of brow arch mirrors the corpus callosum. The spiral of the eye echoes the thalamus. Then the tear line flows through the hypothalamus. Coincidence or ancient insight? Some researchers suggest the Egyptians possessed advanced knowledge of the brain, encoded symbolically, hidden in myth, preserved in art, preserved in art, and not just the Egyptians. In Hindu yogic tradition, the Ajna chakra, the third eye, is positioned between the brows, said to govern perception, intuition, and higher sight. When meditated upon, practitioners report sensations in the center of the forehead, or deep within the brain, exactly where the pineal gland resides. So we ask again, could the pineal gland be the physical anchor for a metaphysical function? Imagine your body as a temple, your glands your energy centers, as altars of light, each with its own resonance, its own awareness. In this temple, the pineal gland may be the sanctum, the still point where matter touches the infinite. It responds to darkness with melatonin, but perhaps it also responds to inner stillness with insight, to silence with clarity, to surrender with truth. In spiritual traditions, the third eye is never just about seeing visions. It is about seeing through illusion, to pierce Maya, to perceive what is real beneath the masks. And so the pineal gland becomes more than a gland. It becomes a metaphor, to lens through which spirit sees itself, not in form, but in presence, not in words, but in knowing. So how does one awaken this eye? How does one clear the static from the signal? We begin with silence, with stillness, with turning inward, to newward. The third eye is not opened by force, it is opened by invitation. Meditation is the oldest method known. Sitting in quiet, breathing with awareness, letting thoughts pass like clouds, gently bringing attention to the space between the brows. With practice, a warmth may arise, a pulse. Some describe a violet light, others feel a floating sensation. It may arise, but it is not about chasing experiences. It is about entering presence. From presence, perception deepens. From presence, the inner eye opens. Other practices include breathwork, deep rhythmic breathing, such as alternate nostril breathing, known as Nadi Shodhana, or Kapalabhati, the skull-shining breath. These stimulate energy flow through the subtle body, activating dormant centers, clearing stagnation. Fasting is also ancient, not merely abstaining from food, but fasting from distraction, from noise, from stimulation. It quiets the body, amplifies subtle senses. Sound is another key. Certain frequencies resonate with the third eye. The tone of 1963 Hz is said to activate the pineal gland, bringing harmony to inner and outer awareness. Chanting OM vibrates through the skull, stimulating the third eye point with each sound wave. Some turn to sunlight. Practices like sun gazing, performed responsibly during sunrise or sunset, are believed to nourish the pineal gland, bringing it light, waking it up from dormancy. But with awakening comes responsibility. The third eye is not a toy, not a party trick. It opens you to unseen realms, to truths you may not be ready for. Some report confusion, emotional upheaval, overwhelm. This is why grounding is essential. The walking in nature, drinking water, staying connected to the earth. Another popular topic is pineal gland decalcification. Some believe that environmental toxins, especially fluoride, harden the gland, reducing its function. They suggest detox protocols, avoiding fluoridated water, eating raw cacao or taking iodine. Science remains inconclusive, but many who adopt these practices report greater clarity, greater peace, a return of the inner sense. So perhaps it is less about whether the gland is physically calcified, and more about whether our attention is whether our minds have become rigid, or our beliefs brittle, or our hearts closed. To awaken the third eye is to soften all of this, to open to the unknown, to become still enough to see. So what happens when the eye opens? Not just in visions or dreams, but in the subtle way you see the world. People describe a shift. Colors become more vivid, time slows down, synchronicities increase. You begin to notice patterns, hidden meanings, messages in silence. Intuition becomes sharper. You just know, without needing evidence. You trust your gut. You sense others' emotions without words. Dreams may become more lucid. Symbols speak louder. Sometimes you wake up with answers you never consciously asked for. But above all, you begin to see beyond form, beyond surface. You start to perceive essence, truth, presence. This is the deeper gift of the third eye. Not just perception of other realms, but perception of this one, clear, without the filters of ego, without the distortions of fear, with clarity and compassion. But this path is not always smooth. There are stages, there is resistance. Old belief systems begin to crumble. What once felt certain now feels uncertain. You may feel lost, unstable, disoriented. This is normal. This is the unlearning, the dissolving of illusion. The ego's attempt to hold on. That's why guidance matters. Community, grounded practices, a strong connection to the body, to nature, to simplicity. Because when the eye opens, you see everything, the light and the shadow, the beauty and the sorrow, both are part of the truth. And now, we arrive at the final inquiry. Are the third eye and the pineal gland two different things? Or are they two languages pointing to the same reality? Science gives us tools, microscopes, measurements, studies. It shows us the pineal gland is a biological structure, a small gland nestled deep in the brain, regulating melatonin, responding to light, perhaps even producing trace DMT. Spirituality gives us metaphors, symbols, stories, experiences that stretch beyond the physical. It tells us the third eye sees beyond illusion, beyond time, beyond identity. One speaks in data, the other in dream. But perhaps they are gazing at the same horizon, from different sides. After all, truth does not belong to one language. It flows through all forms, whispers through science, sings through symbol, and waits quietly in your own stillness. What if the pineal gland is the instrument, and the third eye is the music? What if the gland is the door, and awareness is what walks through it? In ancient texts, the third eye was never about escape. It was about insight, a way of seeing what is, clearly, of recognizing the eternal now. Not something you activate to become special, but something you remember to become whole. So, maybe the question is not, are they the same? But, what opens when I am ready to truly see? To see without fear, to see without distortion, to see not just with eyes, but with soul. Whether you call it third eye, or pineal gland, you are being invited to turn inward, to look not with judgment, but with wonder, not for answers, but for presence. The third eye opens when you stop chasing and start listening, when you stop forcing and start allowing. So take a breath, gently bring your attention to the space between your brows. Feel the quiet there, feel the stillness. Maybe, just maybe, it's already open. Not because you made it open, but because you became present enough to notice.